There are moments when life does not change on the outside, yet something inside feels unsettled. Nothing loud happens. No clear conflict appears, and still the heart feels disturbed, as if a quiet space has been entered without permission. It often begins this way, not with action, but with sound that is not really sound at all. Words remembered, looks replayed, meanings guessed. The noise does not come from the world, it comes from within. They may not say much, sometimes they say nothing at all, and yet their presence lingers like footsteps heard long after the path is empty. A raised eyebrow, half-finished sentence. A silence that feels heavier than speech. The mind begins to fill the gaps, creating stories that may or may not be true. And in that quiet space, the heart starts to react before it understands. Why does silence feel uncomfortable at first? Why does it ask questions without offering answers? The stillness seems to press closer, inviting attention. It reveals emotions that were easier to ignore when life was louder. There is a subtle tension in this moment, a gentle unease, not fear exactly, but awareness. Awareness that something matters, even if it cannot yet be named. They move on easily, or so it seems. Their words float away, their laughter fades, but the listener remains, sitting with thoughts that echo longer than expected. The world appears calm, yet inside something stirs, a wish to explain, a wish to respond, a wish to be understood before misunderstanding settles like dust. This is where many feel the urge to speak quickly, to fill the space before it grows too large. Silence can feel like standing at the edge of a deep well, unsure how far it goes. What if staying quiet means being forgotten? What if it means agreement? What if it means losing something important? But silence, in its first appearance, is not asking for strength. It is asking for attention. It invites the listener to notice the movement of thought, the rise of emotion, the pull of reaction. It asks, softly, what is happening beneath the surface? Not to judge it, just to see it. There is a strange honesty in this moment. Without words, there is no performance, no defense, no explanation, only the raw presence of feeling. The heart notices its own rhythm. The mind notices how quickly it wants to protect itself. Nothing is required yet. Nothing is decided. The quiet simply holds everything as it is. They may assume the silence means indifference, or weakness, or surrender. They may move on with their own conclusions, never knowing what the quiet truly contains. And perhaps that is part of the lesson hidden here. Not every meaning needs to be corrected. Not every assumption needs an answer. In this early stillness, there is no victory and no loss. Only a pause. A moment before the story continues. The listener sits with unanswered questions, with feelings that have not been shaped into words. And in that sitting, something subtle begins to form. A sense that silence is not empty after all, that it carries weight, that it holds a kind of presence that does not announce itself. The night grows calmer when nothing is forced, when the mind stops chasing clarity too quickly. The quiet does not resolve anything yet. It does not promise peace. It simply offers a space where listening becomes possible, and sometimes that is where strength first begins. The quiet lingers, and with it comes a subtle weight, almost imperceptible at first. It is not a sound, nor a movement, but a presence that settles in the chest. It is the feeling of holding something in, of keeping words behind a door that refuses to open. They may not know it, but the silence inside carries tension, a tension that comes from knowing there is a response to be made, a thought to be spoken, yet choosing to wait. Why does holding back feel so heavy? Perhaps it is because the heart wants to be seen, understood, acknowledged. There is a natural pull to express, to release what gathers like clouds in the mind. And yet, the very act of restraint brings its own lesson. The quiet becomes a mirror. It reflects the impatience, the frustration, the small ache of wanting to be noticed. They may misunderstand this quiet. They may believe it to be weakness, or disinterest, or even fear. And so their eyes question, their gestures linger, their words press lightly as if to test the strength that is hidden behind the calm. And still, no answer comes. The silence remains unbroken, carrying its own careful rhythm. Inside, the mind wanders through every possible reply, every imagined argument, every gentle correction, every whispered explanation. Each thought arrives full of urgency, demanding attention, demanding expression. The heart beats faster at the possibilities, the imagined relief that speaking might bring, and yet, for reasons not fully understood, the words do not leave the lips. They are folded inward, kept safe like fragile paper in a quiet drawer. Why does restraint feel so strange? Perhaps because the world is used to sound. It expects reaction. It measures presence by how loudly one can defend, how quickly one can respond. And when that expectation is not met, confusion grows. They may look away, puzzled, or nod as if in agreement. They may assume the quiet is a surrender. But surrender is not the same as restraint. Surrender gives up, silence preserves, silence observes. There is a certain loneliness in this holding back. The heart aches quietly, waiting for something it cannot name. It feels misunderstood, unrecognized, invisible in its own space. And yet, in this very loneliness, there is also discovery. The listener begins to notice the subtleties of thought, the gentle stirrings of feeling that often pass unnoticed. The quiet allows for an intimacy with oneself that words cannot give. They may think the silence is empty, but it is full of thought, of feeling, of watching. Every heartbeat carries its own story. Every breath gathers fragments of reflection. And in this, the listener begins to sense the delicate balance between reaction and observation, between speaking to be understood and remaining to understand. How strange it is to be misunderstood by those who do not know the depth of quiet, to be seen yet not truly seen, to exist in a space where every impulse wants to escape, but every impulse is held gently in place. It is not easy, it is not simple, and yet it is necessary, for here the listener begins to learn the first lessons of inner power. That strength is not always loud, that presence is not always visible, that respect. CT begins quietly, first for oneself. The mind grows stiller as the restraint continues. The heart notices that holding back does not mean giving up. It is an act of care for the self as much as for the other. It is not about proving anything. It is about understanding the weight of each word, the fleeting nature of emotion, the impermanence of disturbance. And in this understanding, the quiet begins to feel less like tension and more like space. Space to breathe, space to notice, space to learn the rhythm of one's own thoughts before they are shared with the world. They may never understand this quiet. They may never recognize the choice to remain still while the world waits for a reaction. And that is not the point. The point is the quiet itself and the heart learning to sit within it, to hold both discomfort and patience, to feel the tension and let it be without surrendering or lashing out, to know that there is power in observing even when observation is mistaken for weakness. And so in this delicate unspoken tension, the listener begins to grow, slowly, almost imperceptibly, not in the way others measure growth, but in the quiet understanding of restraint. The heart learns its own strength, the mind learns its own patience, and the silence, once heavy, begins to feel like a companion rather than a weight. The quiet begins to change. It is no longer heavy or tense, though it still carries the memory of earlier discomfort. Now it feels wider, more open, as if the space around the listener has grown just enough to breathe freely. In this stillness, thoughts come differently. They arrive not as urgent demands, but as gentle whispers, soft questions that do not press for immediate answers. What is needed here? The heart asks quietly, and the mind listens without fear. In the early moments of restraint, the silence felt like a wall. It separated the listener from others, from understanding, from comfort. But now the silence begins to teach. It reveals that not every moment asks for words, not every glance, not every passing thought, not every misunderstanding requires a response. How often, they might wonder, have words been offered too quickly, too eagerly, only to leave regret in their wake? The quiet shows that patience carries its own clarity. They may still be watching. They may still guess, misinterpret, or assume, but it no longer matters in the same way. The listener begins to notice the difference between reaction and presence. Reaction is loud, immediate, and restless. Presence is still careful, observant. Presence does not demand understanding from others. Presence simply is, and in its being it holds a quiet power. What is this power? Perhaps it is the knowledge that one does not need to prove themselves to anyone. Perhaps it is the subtle confidence that comes from feeling anchored within, from recognizing that words are not always necessary for truth to exist. The listener feels a shift, almost imperceptible at first, but unmistakable in its weight. It is as if the heart has been waiting for this moment all along, the moment when the quiet no longer feels like hiding but like discovering something hidden within. They might still move, speak, assume, or press, but the listener has found a place inside that is untouched by misunderstanding, a place where thoughts can form fully, where feelings can be recognized without being judged, where the self can rest without defense. It is not pride, not arrogance. It is simply the acknowledgement of one's own depth, one's own presence. And in that acknowledgement, the mind feels lighter, freer than it has before. How strange it is to realize that the world outside does not define the quiet inside. That silence, once uncomfortable, now becomes a guide. It shows that not all moments need action, not all hearts need persuasion, not all emotions need expression. Some things can simply exist, held gently within, observed without interference. And in this observation, the listener begins to see patterns previously unnoticed. Emotions arise and pass, thoughts flare and fade, misunderstandings come and go, and yet the self remains. It is in this place that the listener begins to feel true respect for their own boundaries, for the space between impulse and response. There is a recognition that strength is not in showing, but in being. That restraint is not weakness, but a quiet mastery over the mind's desire to rush, to argue, to explain. And in this mastery, a new freedom is born, a freedom that no misunderstanding can take away, no assumption can shake, no word spoken by others can diminish. They may never see it, they may never understand the calm that has grown in the listener's heart. And that is not the point. The point is the quiet itself, the gentle awareness that words are tools, not necessities, that patience is a form of power, that listening to oneself and to the unfolding of life can teach more than speaking ever could. The heart begins to slow, to settle into a rhythm that is neither anxious nor eager. Breathing feels softer, lighter, as if the body itself has noticed the shift. Thoughts arrive, and they are examined without urgency, without judgment, without fear. Feelings are acknowledged, not reacted to. And in this space, the listener begins to feel something like clarity, though it is not the clarity of answers. It is the clarity of seeing, of understanding the quiet laws that govern the heart and mind. And so, the stillness becomes not an absence, but a presence. It is not emptiness, but awareness. It is not weakness, but strength quietly learned. The listener sits with the understanding that not every action is necessary, not every response is required, and not every disturbance needs attention. In this knowledge, a soft power grows, a calm certainty that the self, observed and understood, need not prove itself to anyone. It simply is, and that is enough. The quiet has settled now, not like a weight pressing down, but like a soft light filling a room at dusk. It is calm, gentle, and steady. There is no need to measure it, no need to defend it. It simply is. And in this stillness, the listener begins to notice the rhythm of their own heart, the subtle rise and fall of breath, the small movements of thought that pass quietly, like clouds drifting across a calm sky. They may still be out there, moving, guessing, watching, but it does not disturb the peace here. The world can carry its noise, its assumptions, its unfinished stories, and the listener remains untouched, anchored in a presence that requires nothing from anyone. It is not a triumph to be announced, nor a lesson to be taught. It is simply the result of being fully quietly oneself, without apology, without demand. How strange, and how simple it feels to rest in such a place. To realize that self-respect is not loud, not proclaimed, not defended with words or gestures. It grows quietly, in the spaces where no one is watching, in the moments when no one demands an answer, in the choices made to observe rather than to react. It is a stillness that carries its own strength, a strength that does not need recognition. The heart notices the difference between earlier unease and this calm. Before, silence carried tension, a waiting, a holding back. Now silence is chosen. It is a companion, not a challenge. Each thought can move freely, each feeling can exist fully, and yet nothing requires a response. The listener has learned that not reacting is not surrender, it is understanding. Not every disturbance needs engagement. Not every word needs reply. Not every glance needs explanation. There is a clarity here, though it is quiet, gentle, and soft. Clarity is not loud. It does not announce itself. It simply allows the mind to rest in observation, to recognize the patterns of thought and emotion, to see how much can arise and pass without disturbing the foundation of the self. In this recognition, a kind of freedom begins to bloom, a freedom that does not seek attention, does not demand proof, does not ask for agreement. It simply is. They may still misunderstand the quiet. They may think it is empty or weak or indifferent. And yet, it does not matter. Understanding is not required from them. The listener has discovered that presence, patience, and inner observation are sufficient. There is no need to explain, no need to argue, no need to prove. The quiet itself speaks in a language that cannot be interrupted, a language of self-respect and gentle power. It is in these moments that the listener begins to notice the small shifts in their own perception. The rush of emotion has slowed. The heart does not leap at imagined offenses. The mind does not reach for answers too quickly. There is room to feel, to watch, to breathe. There is room to know that reactions are optional, that judgment is optional, that disturbance is temporary. And in this room, this quiet, the self can be fully present, fully understood, fully held, even if no one else notices. How calm it is to choose restraint. How peaceful it feels to let the world spin its own story, while the self remains still, soft, unshaken. This is not weakness, nor is it avoidance. It is the quiet mastery of one's own mind, the gentle acceptance of what cannot be changed, and the careful tending of what can be carried inward. Here, inner power is not shown, it is known, not loud, not demanding, not visible, yet as certain as the rhythm of the breath. And in this knowing, a gentle satisfaction arises, not the satisfaction of accomplishment, nor the pride of victory. It is something quieter, deeper, more lasting. It is the satisfaction of being at home within oneself, of recognizing that silence can hold more than words, that calm can endure where noise cannot, that respect first for oneself is enough to guide every thought, every feeling, every moment that follows. So the listener sits softly, quietly, fully. The world continues beyond the walls of this calm, carrying its guesses, its pressures, its misunderstandings. And yet, The heart is not moved. It rests in the simple truth of presence, in the gentle strength of quiet choice, in the peaceful certainty of self-respect. Here, nothing more is needed. Here, silence has become home.